The frozen lake cracked beneath Willow Drake's boots like thunder splitting the dawn sky, and in that heartbeat before the ice gave way completely, she knew she had made a fatal mistake running across the winter-locked waters of Donner Lake. It was December 1879, and the Sierra Nevada mountains held Jamestown, California in a grip of unprecedented cold. The small mining town, usually blessed with mild winters compared to its higher elevation neighbors, had been transformed into a crystalline prison of ice and snow after 3 weeks of relentless storms. Willow had fled her boarding house without thinking, driven only by the primal need to escape Marcus Hendricks, the man who refused to accept that their brief courtship had ended 6 months ago. Marcus had shown up at her door that morning drunk and belligerent, demanding she reconsider his proposal of marriage. When she refused for the 100th time, his pleading turned to threats, and Willow had done the only thing she could think of. She ran. Through the empty streets of early morning Jamestown, past the shuttered general store and the silent saloon, with Marcus's angry shouts echoing behind her. She had turned toward what she thought was a snow-covered meadow at the edge of town, not realizing until too late that she was running across the surface of the small lake that fed into the larger waterways beyond. The ice shattered. Cold so intense it felt like fire engulfed her body as she plunged into the black water. Her heavy wool dress became an anchor, dragging her down into the darkness. She kicked Weimarus desperately, her lungs already screaming for air, her limbs going numb with terrifying speed. The hole in the ice above her seemed impossibly far away, though it could only have been a few feet. Her vision began to darken at the edges. Then something crashed through the ice beside her, and strong arms wrapped around her waist. Through her panic, she felt herself being pulled upward toward the light. They broke the surface together, and Willow gasped for air, her body shaking so violently she could barely hold on to consciousness. "I have got you," a deep voice said near her ear. "Hold on to me. Do not let go." The man who held her was struggling to break through the fragile ice between them and the shore, using his body as a battering ram while keeping one arm locked around her. Each impact sent fresh waves of icy water over them both, but he did not stop, did not slow. Willow tried to help, but her limbs would not obey her commands. The cold had stolen all her strength. After what felt like an eternity but could only have been minutes, they reached the solid shore. The man half carried, half dragged her onto the snow-covered bank where they both collapsed. Willow's teeth chattered so hard she thought they might shatter. Her rescuer was breathing heavily, his own body shaking from the cold. "We have to move," he said, forcing himself to his feet. "We will freeze to death out here. Can you stand?" Willow tried, but her legs buckled. Without hesitation, the man scooped her into his arms and began running toward the nearest building. Through her fading consciousness, she caught glimpses of him. Dark hair plastered to his head, a strong jaw set with determination, eyes the color of whiskey and firelight. He wore cowboy gear, she noticed dimly, chaps, and a heavy coat, though the coat was now soaked through and useless against the cold. He kicked open the door of the old Patterson barn, one of the few structures on this edge of town. Inside it was marginally warmer, protected at least from the brutal wind. The man set her down gently on a pile of hay, then immediately began stripping off his wet outer layers. "Your dress," he said, his back turned to her. "You have to get it off. You will die if you stay in those wet clothes." Willow's fingers fumbled uselessly at the buttons. The cold had robbed her of all dexterity. After a moment, she heard the man curse softly, and then he was kneeling beside her, his eyes averted as much as possible, while his steady fingers worked at the fastenings of her dress. "I apologize for the impropriety," he said, his voice rough, "but propriety will not matter if you are dead." He helped her out of the sodden wool, leaving her in her chemise and petticoats, which were also wet but less heavily so. Then he wrapped her in his own dry undershirt and began rubbing her arms and legs vigorously, trying to restore circulation. Willow wanted to protest to maintain some shred of modesty, but she could not form words. Her body continued its violent shaking. The man worked methodically, his touch impersonal but gentle. He pulled horse blankets from a nearby stall and wrapped them around both of them, then gathered Willow close to his body, sharing what warmth they had left between them. "My name is Samuel Ashford," he said, his breath warm against her hair. "I am a ranch hand at the Murphy spread north of town. I was bringing a mare into town for the blacksmith when I saw you running across the ice, and then that man chasing you. When you fell through, I did not think. I just jumped in." Willow's shaking was beginning to subside, though she still felt cold to her very bones. "Willow," she managed to whisper, "Willow Drake." "Well, Miss Drake, what in God's name were you doing running across Frozen Lake in December?" "Running," she said simply, "from Marcus. He would not leave me alone." She felt Samuel's body tense. "The man who was chasing you?" "Yes. He wants to marry me. I have refused him repeatedly, but he will not accept it. This morning he came to my boarding house and became aggressive. I fled without thinking clearly about where I was going." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You're safe now. I will not let anyone hurt you." There was something in his voice, a quiet certainty that made Willow believe him. She allowed herself to relax slightly against his chest, drawing comfort from his solid presence. Outside she could hear voices calling, people searching. The commotion at the lake must have drawn attention. "In here," Samuel called out. "We are in the Patterson barn." Moments later, the door burst open and several townspeople rushed in, including Doc Morrison and Mrs. Pemberton, who ran the boarding house where Willow lived. Their faces registered shock at the scene. Willow and Samuel wrapped together in horse blankets, their wet clothes scattered around them. "Lord have mercy, Mrs." Pemberton breathed. "What happened?" Doc Morrison was already moving toward them, his experienced eyes assessing their condition. "Get them to my office now. They need to be warmed properly and checked for frostbite. Mrs. Pemberton, bring dry clothes for Miss Drake." The next hour passed in a blur. Willow was whisked away to Doc Morrison's examination room, where she was dressed in borrowed clothes and examined thoroughly. Her fingers and toes were dangerously cold, but the doctor believed she would recover fully with no permanent damage, thanks to Samuel's quick action in getting her out of her wet clothes and warming her. In the other room, Samuel was receiving similar treatment. Through the thin walls, Willow could hear Doc Morrison lecturing him about the foolishness of jumping into a frozen lake, even to save someone's life. "You could have died just as easily as she could have," the doctor said sternly. "But I did not," Samuel replied, his voice calm, "and neither did she. That is what matters." When they were both deemed stable enough to leave, Doc Morrison insisted they stay in his front room by the fire for the rest of the day, drinking hot tea and recovering. Mrs. Pemberton had returned with a change of clothes for Willow, along with news that made Willow's stomach clench with anxiety. "That Marcus Hendricks has been arrested," the older woman said, her lips pursed with disapproval. "Sheriff Dalton saw the whole thing from his office window, saw you running in terror, saw Marcus chasing you, saw what happened at the lake. Marcus did not even try to help when you fell through the ice, just stood there on the shore. The sheriff has him locked up for reckless endangerment and harassment. Says there have been enough complaints from you about that man's behavior." Willow felt tears prick her eyes, though whether from relief or delayed shock she could not say. "Thank God," she whispered. Samuel, dressed now in borrowed clothes that were slightly too small for his tall frame, moved to sit beside her on the settee. "Did he hurt you before today?" he asked quietly. Willow shook her head. "Not physically, but he made me afraid. He followed me everywhere, sent me letters, waited outside my work. After I rejected his proposal, he became obsessed with changing my mind. He said I belonged to him, that I had no right to refuse him." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Men like that are cowards. They see women as property, not people." "You have experience with such men?" Willow asked. "My mother," Samuel said after a pause. "Before she met my stepfather, she was married to a man who believed he owned her. He made her life hell until the day he drank himself to death. She taught me that real strength is not about control or dominance. It is about protecting those who need protection and respecting those who do not. Willow looked at him properly for the first time since the rescue. He was perhaps 25 or 26 years old, with strong, weathered features that spoke of years working outdoors. His dark hair was still damp, curling slightly at his collar. His eyes, which she had thought were whiskey-colored in her delirium, were actually a deep hazel that shifted between brown and green depending on the light. He had the build of a working man, all lean muscle and broad shoulders, and his hands, wrapped around a cup of tea, were scarred and calloused from hard labor. He was, she realized, quite handsome. But more than that, there was a kindness in his face, a gentleness in the way he moved that made her feel safe. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saving my life, for not hesitating." Samuel met her eyes, and something passed between them, a connection that made Willow's breath catch. "I would do it again," he said simply, 100 times over. The rest of the day passed in quiet conversation. Doc Morrison checked on them regularly, satisfied that they were both recovering well. Willow learned that Samuel had come to California 3 years ago from Kansas, seeking work after his family's farm failed during the grasshopper plague of 1874. He had worked various ranch jobs before settling at the Murphy Spread, where he had earned a reputation as one of the best horse handlers in the region. "Horses are honest," Samuel told her as the winter afternoon light faded outside the window. "They do not lie about what they want or how they feel. I appreciate that." Willow found herself smiling. "I work at the general store," she said. "Have for the past year since I came to Jamestown from Sacramento. My parents died of fever, and I had nothing keeping me there. My mother's sister lived here, invited me to stay with her, but she passed on 6 months ago, and I have been on my own since then." "Is that when Marcus started pursuing you?" Willow nodded. "He saw me as vulnerable, I think, a woman alone, no family. He thought I would be grateful for his attention, that I would marry him out of necessity, if not affection. He did not understand that I would rather struggle alone than bind myself to a man I do not love." "You are brave," Samuel said. "Many women would have accepted, even knowing it would make them miserable." "I saw what that kind of marriage did to my aunt," Willow replied. "She married for security, not love. Her husband was not cruel, but he was cold, indifferent. She spent 30 years in a house with a man who barely acknowledged her existence. When she died, he remarried within 3 months. I swore I would never settle for that. I would rather die alone than live without love." Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think dying alone is not your fate, Willow Drake." The way he said her name sent warmth through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. She looked at him, and he looked back, and in that moment, Willow felt something shift in the air between them, something significant and undeniable. Doc Morrison chose that moment to return, breaking the spell. "Well, you two are looking much better. Color is back in your cheeks. Samuel, I want you to take it easy for the next few days. No heavy work. Your body has been through trauma, even if you feel fine now. Miss Drake, same goes for you. Rest and warmth. And both of you should consider yourselves fortunate. Things could have gone very differently today." They promised to follow his instructions. As evening fell, Mrs. Pemberton arrived to escort Willow back to the boarding house. "Your room is warm and ready," the older woman said. "I have made you soup and bread. You will eat and then you will sleep. Doctor's orders and mine." Samuel stood as they prepared to leave. "May I call on you tomorrow?" he asked Willow, "to ensure you are recovering well?" Willow felt her heart flutter. "I would like that very much." That night, lying in her bed with extra blankets piled on top of her, Willow replayed the day's events in her mind. The terror of the ice breaking, the cold darkness of the water, the moment Samuel's arms had wrapped around her. The way he had looked at her in Doc Morrison's front room with such gentle intensity. She had nearly died today. but somehow lying there in the safety of her room, she felt more alive than she had in months. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Willow woke early, feeling surprisingly well considering her ordeal. Her muscles were sore and her fingers still tingled occasionally, but overall she felt strong. Mrs. Pemberton insisted she stay home from work at the general store, and Willow did not argue. She was secretly hoping Samuel would make good on his promise to call. He arrived mid-morning, his hat in his hands, looking nervous in a way that was utterly charming. Mrs. Pemberton ushered him into the front parlor with a knowing smile, and Willow came down to meet him, her heart racing. "You look well," Samuel said, his eyes searching her face. "I am glad." "Thanks to you," Willow replied. "Please, sit." They sat together on the parlor sofa, a respectable distance between them, though Willow found herself wishing he would sit closer. They talked easily, discovering shared opinions on books and music, laughing over stories of mishaps at work. Samuel told her about the horses he trained, the satisfaction of earning an animal's trust. Willow told him about her dreams of someday opening her own shop, perhaps a bookstore, though she knew it was unlikely on her meager wages. "Why unlikely?" Samuel asked. "If you work toward it, save your money, plan carefully, why could you not achieve it?" "Because I am a woman," Willow said simply. "Banks will not loan me money. Suppliers will not take me seriously. The world is not set up for women to own businesses." "Then the world is foolish," Samuel said with conviction. "I have seen you at the general store. You are clever and competent. You would succeed at anything you set your mind to." Willow felt warmth bloom in her chest at his words. Marcus had always dismissed her dreams, told her she should focus on being a good wife instead of entertaining foolish ambitions, but Samuel spoke as if her dreams were not only valid, but inevitable. Over the following weeks, Samuel called on Willow regularly. At first, it was every few days, then every other day, then daily. The town gossips began to talk, but Willow found she did not care. She was falling in love truly and deeply for the first time in her life. Samuel was unlike any man she had ever known. He listened when she spoke, remembered small details she mentioned in passing, asked her opinions, and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. He was funny, with a dry wit that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He was thoughtful, bringing her small gifts, a book he thought she would enjoy, wildflowers he had found on his ride into town, a ribbon the exact blue of her eyes. But more than all of that, he made her feel seen, not as an object to be won or a prize to be claimed, but as a person, a whole, complete person worthy of respect and care. For his part, Samuel was equally smitten. He told her one evening in February as they walked together through the snow-covered streets of Jamestown that he had never met anyone like her. "You are strong," he said, "not just in surviving what Marcus put you through or what happened at the lake, but in how you live your life. You do not apologize for taking up space in the world. You know your own mind. I admire that more than I can say." Willow stopped walking and turned to face him. The winter moon was bright overhead, casting silver light across the snow. Samuel looked down at her, and she saw in his eyes the same feelings that were growing in her own heart. "I am falling in love with you," she said, the words coming out before she could second-guess them. "I know it has only been 2 months since we met, and perhaps it is too soon to say such things, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. You saved my life, Samuel Ashford, and then you gave me a reason to be grateful for that life. I love you." Samuel's face transformed, joy breaking across it like sunrise. He reached up to cup her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his palms. "Willow Drake," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have loved you since the moment I pulled you from that frozen lake and you looked at me with such fierce determination to survive. These past 2 months have been the happiest of my life. I wake up each morning thinking of you, and I go to sleep each night dreaming of our future. I love you with everything I am." He kissed her then soft and sweet under the moonlight, and Willow felt the last pieces of her heart click into place. This was what she had been waiting for. This was the love she had dreamed of. Not obligation or convenience, but true partnership, true connection. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know I should court you properly for longer, but I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Be my wife, Willow. Let me spend the rest of my days making you happy." Willow laughed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes," she said, "yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 6 weeks later, in April of 1880, in a simple ceremony at the small church on Main Street. Half the town turned out to witness it, including Doc Morrison, who gave Willow away in the absence of her father, and Mrs. Pemberton, who cried through the entire service. Even Sheriff Dalton attended, looking pleased with himself for having locked up Marcus Hendricks, who was serving 6 months in the county jail for his crimes. Willow wore a dress of pale blue silk, purchased with her savings and altered by Mrs. Pemberton's clever hands. Samuel wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous as he waited for her at the altar. When she walked down the aisle toward him, his face lit up with such love that Willow felt her heart might burst from happiness. They spoke their vows in strong, clear voices, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her with such tenderness that several of the watching women sighed audibly. The reception was held at the town hall with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible for a small town like Jamestown to produce. Willow danced until her feet ached, first with Samuel, then with Doc Morrison, then with several of the ranch hands from the Murphy spread who worked with Samuel. But always, her eyes found her husband across the room, and always he was watching her with that same expression of wonder, as if he could not quite believe she was his. As evening fell, they left the celebration and rode out to the small cabin Samuel had built on a piece of land he had purchased at the edge of the Murphy property. It was modest, just 3 rooms, but he had worked on it for weeks, making it as comfortable as possible for his new bride. "It is not much," he said as he helped her down from the wagon, "but it is ours, and I promise you, Willow, I will work every day to give you more, to give you the life you deserve." Willow looked up at the cabin, at the smoke curling from the chimney where Samuel had laid a fire that morning, at the windows glowing with lamplight. It was not a grand house, but it was filled with love. That made it more valuable than any mansion. "It is perfect," she said. "You are perfect. This is all I have ever wanted." Samuel carried her over the threshold, and they spent their first night as husband and wife discovering each other, learning the geography of intimacy, building the foundation of a life together. The following months were filled with hard work and deep happiness. Samuel continued his work at the Murphy Ranch, training horses and managing the breeding program. Willow kept her job at the general store, though now she was saving money with a concrete goal: their own ranch, their own future. They fell into an easy rhythm, these two people who had found each other through near tragedy. Samuel would rise before dawn to tend to his work, and Willow would wake with him, making breakfast and packing his lunch. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's presence. On Sundays, they would ride out into the hills, exploring the wild beauty of the Sierra Nevada mountains, always careful to avoid frozen lakes. That particular joke about the lake became one of their running themes. Samuel would tease her about her inability to judge ice thickness, and Willow would retort that she had needed to give him an opportunity to be heroic. It was their way of processing the trauma of that December morning, turning it into something they could laugh about rather than fear. In the fall of 1880, Willow discovered she was pregnant. She told Samuel on a cool October evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I have news," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Samuel's face went through a series of expressions: shock, confusion, and then pure, radiant joy. He pulled her into his arms, Holding her so tightly she laughed and protested that he would squeeze the baby right out of her. A baby, he kept repeating. We are going to have a baby. I am going to be a father. And I a mother, Willow said, feeling a mixture of excitement and terror at the prospect. Are you happy? Happy? Samuel pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Willow, I am more than happy. I am blessed beyond measure. A year ago I was alone, with nothing but a job and a distant dream of something more. Now I have you, and soon we will have a child. How did I get so lucky? We both got lucky, Willow corrected him, even if the circumstances of our meeting were rather dramatic. Rather dramatic, Samuel repeated with a laugh. That is one way to describe it. The pregnancy was not easy. Willow suffered from terrible morning sickness for the first few months, and Samuel hovered over her like a worried mother hen, insisting she rest more, eat more, do less. Doc Morrison finally had to tell him to calm down before he drove his poor wife to distraction. But for all the discomfort, Willow had never been happier. She loved watching her body change, feeling the baby grow inside her. She loved Samuel's gentle touches to her expanding belly, the way he would talk to the child even though it had not yet been born, telling stories about the world it would enter. Your mother is the bravest person I know, he would say, his lips pressed to Willow's stomach. She is strong and smart and beautiful. You are very lucky to have her. And you are lucky to have your father, Willow would add. He is kind and good, and he saved my life. He will keep you safe always. Their son was born on a warm day in May of 1881, after a long and difficult labor. Doc Morrison delivered the baby, with Mrs. Pemberton assisting, while Samuel paced outside the bedroom, nearly wearing a hole in the floor with his worried steps. When the baby finally arrived, healthy and screaming with impressive lung capacity, Samuel was allowed into the room. He approached the bed slowly, reverently, his eyes fixed on the tiny bundle in Willow's arms. Meet your son, Willow said, exhausted but glowing with happiness. Say hello to Simon Samuel Ashford. Samuel reached out with trembling hands to take the baby. The moment Simon was placed in his arms, the infant quieted, his tiny eyes opening to stare up at his father. Samuel looked down at his son with such overwhelming love that Willow felt tears stream down her face. Hello, Simon, Samuel whispered. I am your father, and I promise you right here and now that I will love you and your mother for every day of my life. I will work to give you a good future. I will teach you to be kind and strong. I will show you what it means to be a good man. Simon made a small sound, as if in agreement, and Willow laughed through her tears. Life with a baby was chaotic and wonderful. Simon was a good child, relatively calm except when hungry, and he seemed to grow bigger every day. Samuel was a devoted father, coming home from work each evening eager to hold his son, to help with the night feedings, to take on any task that would ease Willow's burden. You do more than most men would, Mrs. Pemberton told him approvingly one Sunday after church. Most fathers leave all the baby care to their wives. Then most fathers are fools, Samuel replied, bouncing Simon gently in his arms. They are missing the best part of life. When Simon was 6 months old, Samuel came home one evening with news that made Willow's heart race with excitement. The Murphy Ranch is selling off a parcel of land, he said. 500 acres, good grazing, water access, everything we would need to start our own operation. Mr. Murphy offered to sell it to me at a fair price and to extend credit for the portion we cannot pay outright. With what we have saved, we could do it, Willow. We could start our own ranch. Willow looked around their small cabin, then down at Simon sleeping peacefully in his cradle. Their savings represented years of careful planning and sacrifice. It was a risk buying the land, but it was also an opportunity. Yes, she said, let us do it. Let us build something for our family. They purchased the land in January of 1882 and spent the next year building their ranch from the ground up. It was hard, exhausting work. Samuel worked longer hours than ever, building fences, constructing a new house and barn, purchasing their first cattle. Willow managed the finances, kept the household running, cared for Simon, and still worked part-time at the general store to bring in extra money. There were moments when they were both so tired they could barely speak, moments when the challenges seemed insurmountable. But they faced everything together, united in their determination to succeed. Their new house was completed in the spring of 1883, a substantial structure with 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a front porch that looked out over their land. The day they moved in, carrying their modest possessions into the spacious rooms, Willow stood in the front parlor and cried. "What is wrong?" Samuel asked, immediately concerned. "Nothing is wrong," Willow said, wiping her eyes. "Everything is right. More right than I ever imagined it could be. 3 years ago, I was running for my life across a frozen lake. Now I am standing in my own home, on my own land, with a husband I love more than life, and a beautiful son. How is this my life?" Samuel pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "This is your life because you are remarkable, because you refused to settle for less than you deserved, because you took a chance on a ranch hand who happened to be in the right place at the right time." "You were exactly where you needed to be," Willow corrected him, "and so was I. Even running from Marcus, even falling through the ice, it was all leading me to you." They named their ranch the Second Chance, in honor of how they found each other. Under Samuel's skilled management and Willow's careful financial planning, it prospered. They started with a small herd of cattle and gradually expanded, earning a reputation for quality stock. Samuel's horse training skills brought in additional income, with people from surrounding counties bringing their difficult horses to him for gentling. In the fall of 1884, Willow gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Wendy. She had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair, and from the moment she was born, she had both her parents wrapped around her tiny finger. Simon, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from feeding to diaper changes. "You are going to be a wonderful big brother," Willow told him, "just like your father is a wonderful father." Life settled into a comfortable pattern. The ranch continued to grow, providing well for the family. Simon grew tall and strong, showing early signs of inheriting his father's way with horses. Wendy was a bright, curious child who followed her older brother everywhere, determined to do everything he did. In 1887, Marcus Hendricks was released from jail and immediately left California, heading east. Sheriff Dalton made sure to inform Samuel and Willow, but assured them that Marcus had been sufficiently warned about the consequences of ever approaching Willow again. "He knows that if he comes near you, he will answer to every man in this town," the sheriff said. "You are safe. You have always been safe, but now there's no shadow hanging over you at all." Willow felt a weight lift that she had not fully realized she was carrying. Marcus was gone, truly gone, and could never threaten her or her family again. That summer, Samuel took the whole family on a trip to San Francisco, a week-long journey that felt like a grand adventure. Simon and Wendy were wide-eyed at the city, the crowds, the tall buildings, the ships in the harbor. But after a few days of sightseeing, Simon announced that he missed the ranch, missed the space and the quiet and the horses. "Me too," Wendy agreed, and Willow and Samuel exchanged amused glances. "It seems we have raised true ranch children," Samuel said. "They prefer open land to city streets." "Like their parents," Willow replied, taking his hand. They returned to Jamestown, to their ranch, to the life they had built together, and it felt like coming home in the truest sense. Years passed in a blur of busy, happy days. The ranch grew more prosperous. Simon became an accomplished horseman working alongside his father. Wendy showed a talent for business, helping her mother manage the ranch accounts with a mathematical precision that impressed everyone. In 1891, when Simon was 10 and Wendy was 7, Willow gave birth to their third child, another son they named William. He was a wild, energetic child from the start, always climbing things he should not climb, always getting into mischief. but he had a smile that could charm his way out of any trouble, and a laugh that filled the house with joy. "We are well and truly outnumbered now," Samuel joked one evening as he watched all 3 children playing in the yard while Willow rested on the porch swing. 3 children. How did we get 3 children? "The usual way," Willow replied with a smile. "And I would not change a thing, though I think 3 is quite enough. Our family is complete." Samuel sat beside her on the swing, pulling her close. "Our family is perfect. You are perfect. How did I get so blessed?" "We blessed each other," Willow said, resting her head on his shoulder. "The day you jumped into that lake after me, you changed both our lives. You gave us both a second chance." "I would do it again," Samuel said, just as he had said on that first day in Doc Morrison's front room. 100 times over. The children grew. Simon showed no interest in leaving the ranch, content to work alongside his father and eventually take over the operation. Wendy, on the other hand, had ambitions beyond Jamestown. She wanted to attend college, to study business, to see the world. Samuel and Willow encouraged her dreams, even as they worried about letting their daughter venture so far from home. "The world is changing," Willow said one night as she and Samuel discussed Wendy's future. "Women have more opportunities now than they did when I was her age. I do not want her to be limited by her gender the way I was." "Then we will support her," Samuel agreed. "We will give her every opportunity to succeed. Just as your dreams mattered, so do hers." When Wendy was 18, in 1902, she left for college in San Francisco. It was hard to say goodbye, but both Samuel and Willow were proud of their daughter's courage and determination. She promised to write often and visit when she could. Simon married a local girl named Rosemary in 1903, and they built a house on the ranch property, close enough to help with the work, but far enough for privacy. Willow delighted in planning the wedding, in welcoming Rosemary into the family, in watching her son begin his own journey into married life. "Remember when I proposed to you under the moonlight?" Samuel asked Willow the night of Simon's wedding. They were dancing together at the reception, moving slowly to the music while their family and friends celebrated around them. "I remember everything about us," Willow replied. "Every moment, from that terrifying morning on the lake to this very instant, it has all been a gift. Even the scary parts? Even those, because they led me to you and to this life. I would endure anything for this." William, their youngest, inherited his father's way with horses and his mother's business sense. By the time he was 15, he was already talking about expanding the ranch's horse breeding program, about developing a reputation that would draw buyers from across the state. "He is ambitious," Samuel said, with a mixture of pride and amusement. "He wants to build an empire." "Then let him try," Willow replied. "We started with nothing but hope and determination. Who are we to limit what he might achieve?" In 1905, on a warm December day that bore no resemblance to that freezing morning 26 years earlier, Willow and Samuel took a walk along the edge of their property, following the path that led to a small pond. It was not the same lake where Willow had fallen through the ice, but it served as a reminder of where their journey began. 26 years, Samuel said, his arm around Willow's waist. He was 51 now, his dark hair streaked with gray, his face weathered by years of outdoor work, but his eyes still held the same warmth, the same love that they had on the day they met. Willow, at 48, had laugh lines around her eyes and silver threads in her hair, but she felt more beautiful than she had in her youth. She was loved, thoroughly and completely. She had built a life beyond her wildest dreams. 26 years since you saved my life, she agreed. 26 years of loving you. 24 years of marriage, Samuel added. 3 children, 1 grandchild on the way. Simon and Rosemary had recently announced they were expecting, news that had filled the whole family with joy. A ranch that prospers, a family that thrives, a love that endures. Willow stopped walking and turned to face her husband. "Samuel Ashford, you gave me everything." "No," Samuel said, cupping her face in his hands just as he had on the night he proposed. We gave each other everything. That is what partnership means. That is what love means. He kissed her then as the winter sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. And Willow thought, as she had thought so many times over the years, how grateful she was for that frozen lake, for Marcus's relentless pursuit forcing her to run, for Samuel's heroism in jumping in after her. All the fear and pain of that morning had been worth it to arrive at this moment, this life, this love. They walked back to the house hand in hand, as they always did, as they always would. Inside, the lamps were lit, and smoke curled from the chimney. They could see Simon and Rosemary's house beyond, its windows also glowing warm. Somewhere in the barn, William was probably working with the horses, even though it was past dinner time. Wendy would arrive tomorrow from San Francisco for the Christmas holiday. This was their life. This was their legacy. A second chance seized and treasured and built into something solid and enduring. Simon and Rosemary's son was born in March of 1906, a healthy boy they named Samuel after his grandfather. When Samuel held his namesake for the first time, Willow watched tears stream down her husband's face. I never imagined this, he said softly, gazing at the baby in his arms. Standing here with a grandchild, being part of a family like this. When I was young, alone, I thought I would always be drifting, and then I found you, and suddenly I had a purpose, a home, everything. We found each other, Willow corrected gently, as she always did. Neither of us would be here without the other. Wendy graduated from college that spring with honors in business and accounting. She returned to Jamestown not to stay, but to help establish a business consulting service for ranches and farms in the area. She split her time between San Francisco and Jamestown, bringing new ideas and modern practices to the families who hired her services. She's going to change the world, Samuel said proudly, after watching Wendy present a detailed financial plan to a neighboring rancher. Our daughter is going to change the whole world. She learned from the best, Willow replied. You taught all our children that their dreams matter, that hard work and dedication can achieve anything. You showed them what a good man looks like. That is your legacy. In 1908, William married a girl from Sacramento named Claire, and they began their own horse breeding operation on the far corner of the ranch property. The Second Chance Ranch was becoming a family compound, multiple generations working together toward common goals while maintaining their individual dreams and identities. Willow walked through her life in those years feeling overwhelmed by gratitude. Every morning she woke beside the man who had saved her life and then given her a reason to cherish that life. Every day she worked alongside family who loved and supported each other. Every evening she watched the sun set over land they had built from nothing. Do you remember being afraid? She asked Samuel one night as they sat on their porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Back when we first bought this land, when we were starting the ranch, do you remember worrying we might fail? I remember, Samuel said, but I was never truly afraid because I had you. As long as we were together, I knew we could face anything. That is how I felt too, Willow said. From the moment you pulled me from that lake, I knew I was safe with you. Even when things were hard, even when we struggled, I never doubted us. Never doubt us, Samuel agreed. Not then, not now, not ever. In 1910, Wendy announced she was engaged to a professor she had met in San Francisco, a man named Thomas, who taught economics at the university. Samuel and Willow traveled to the city for the wedding, a grand affair that reflected Wendy's success and sophisticated city life. But even surrounded by the elegance of San Francisco society, Samuel and Willow felt most at home when they returned to their ranch, to the simple life they had built. Wendy is happy, Willow said. That is all that matters. She found love, real love. All our children have found that. We gave them a strong foundation. You gave them that, Samuel said. You showed them what strength looks like, what courage looks like. They learned from watching you. More years passed, each one precious and fleeting. Simon and Rosemary had 3 more children. William and Claire had 2. Wendy and Thomas had one. The ranch echoed with the sounds of grandchildren playing, learning to ride, helping with chores, growing up surrounded by love and land and legacy. Samuel's hair turned fully gray, then white. His body showed the wear of decades of physical labor, his movements slower, his joints stiff on cold mornings, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Willow never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepening into something unshakable and eternal. Willow aged more gracefully, her hair silver, but her face still lovely, her body still strong from a lifetime of ranch work. She moved with confidence and purpose, the matriarch of a large, thriving family. On December 15th, 1920, exactly 41 years after the day they met, Samuel woke Willow before dawn and asked her to take a ride with him. "A ride?" she asked, still drowsy. "Samuel, it is freezing outside, and we are too old for pre-dawn adventures." "We are never too old," Samuel said with a smile. "Trust me, please." Willow dressed warmly and followed him outside. 2 horses were saddled and waiting, their breath visible in the cold morning air. Samuel helped her mount, then climbed onto his own horse, and they rode out across the ranch property as the sun began to rise. They stopped at the edge of their land, where a small frozen pond reflected the pink and orange sky. Samuel dismounted and helped Willow down, then led her to a bench he had placed there without her knowledge. 41 years ago today, you fell through the ice of a frozen lake," Samuel said, "and I jumped in after you. It was the best decision I ever made. Every day since then has been a gift. You are my gift, Willow. You always have been." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a locket, delicate and beautiful, engraved with their initials and the date they met. "I wanted you to have something to mark this anniversary," Samuel said. "The anniversary of the day our lives changed forever." Willow opened the locket and found 2 tiny photographs inside. One was from their wedding day, both of them young and glowing with happiness. The other was recent, taken at Wendy's wedding, showing them older but still side by side, still in love. "Samuel," Willow whispered, tears streaming down her face, "it is perfect. You are perfect. This life is perfect." "I love you," Samuel said, "more now than ever before, more every day. You are my everything, Willow Ashford, my heart, my home, my reason for being." "And you are mine, Willow replied. "Always and forever you are mine." They sat together on the bench as the sun rose higher, warming the cold morning, chasing away the frost. Around them the ranch awakened. In the distance they could see the houses where their children lived, the barns where their grandchildren would soon be doing morning chores. Everything they had built, everything they had become, stemmed from that terrifying, miraculous morning 41 years ago. "Thank you," Willow said softly, "for saving me, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life." "Thank you," Samuel replied, "for being worth saving, for loving me back, for making every day an adventure." They rode back to the house hand in hand, as the world around them came fully to life. It was a new day, one of thousands they had shared, and thousands more they hoped to share. Their story, which had begun with ice breaking in cold water and desperate fear, had become a story of warmth, safety, and enduring love. That evening, the entire family gathered for dinner, a chaotic, joyful affair with children running everywhere and adults talking over each other. At the head of the table, Samuel and Willow sat side by side, watching their legacy unfold around them. 3 children, now grown with families of their own. 9 grandchildren, ranging from teenagers to toddlers. A ranch that had started as a dream and become a reality. Simon stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us what love looks like, what commitment means, what family is. Everything good in my life stems from the foundation you built. Thank you." "To Samuel and Willow," everyone chorused, raising their glasses. After dinner, after the grandchildren had been put to bed and the children had returned to their own homes, Samuel and Willow sat alone in their front parlor. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Samuel held Willow close, her head resting on his shoulder. "If you could go back," Samuel asked quietly, "back to that morning when you were running from Marcus, knowing what you know now, would you do anything differently?" Willow thought about it. The terror of that morning, the bone-deep cold of the water, the genuine fear that she was going to die, but also Samuel's strong arms pulling her to safety, his gentle hands warming her, his kind eyes looking at her with such concern and then later with such love. "No," she said firmly, "I would not change a single thing. Every moment, good and bad, led us here, led us to this life, this family, this love. I would live through the fear and the cold 1,000 times over to arrive at this exact moment." "Me too," Samuel agreed. "Though I admit I still hate the cold. Winter is not my favorite season." Willow laughed. "Even after 41 years, you still complain about the winter." "I have earned the right," Samuel said with a smile. "I jumped into a frozen lake in December. That entitles me to complain about cold weather for the rest of my life." "Fair enough," Willow conceded. "You may complain about the cold as much as you like, as long as you also acknowledge that the cold brought us together." "The cold brought us together," Samuel agreed, "and your courage, and my recklessness, and fate, and luck, and love, all of it came together to create us, to create this. And I'm grateful, Willow. Every single day, I am grateful." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the fire crackle, feeling the warmth and safety of the home they had built together. Outside, the California night was cold and clear, stars bright in the winter sky. Inside, there was only love. The years continued to pass, as years do. Samuel and Willow grew older, their bodies slowing but their minds and hearts remaining sharp. They watched their grandchildren grow into young adults, watched some of them leave for college or careers in distant cities, watched others stay on the ranch to continue the family legacy. In 1925, they celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary with a party that drew people from all over the county. Friends, family, business associates, everyone who had been touched by the love story of Samuel and Willow Ashford came to celebrate. 45 years, Samuel said in his speech that evening. 45 years since I married the woman who fell through the ice and into my heart. It has been the greatest adventure of my life. And if I have another 45 years left, I will spend every one of them loving her. The crowd cheered, and Willow cried happy tears, and their children and grandchildren looked on with love and pride, but time, relentless and unstoppable, had its way. In the winter of 1928, Samuel fell ill with pneumonia. For 3 weeks he fought it, his strong constitution and stubborn will refusing to give in. Willow never left his side, holding his hand, talking to him, reminding him of all the reasons he had to keep fighting. "Stay with me," she whispered in the dark hours of night. "Please, Samuel, I am not ready to lose you. I will never be ready." Samuel, his voice weak but his eyes still clear, looked at his wife and smiled. "Willow, my love, I have had more happiness than any man deserves. If this is my time, I go knowing I was loved, knowing I loved well. That is enough." "It is not enough," Willow said fiercely. "We need more time. I need more time with you." "Time is not measured in years," Samuel said. "We have had a lifetime together in every moment we have shared, however long or short. It was enough because it was with you." But Samuel was strong, stronger than the illness. He recovered slowly, though the pneumonia left him weaker than before. The family rallied around him, everyone taking turns helping with the ranch work that Samuel could no longer do. He accepted the help with grace, though Willow could see it pained him to admit his limitations. "I'm getting old," he said one afternoon as he watched Simon and William working with the horses. "My body is not what it used to be." You are 74 years old, Willow said practically. You are entitled to slow down. You have worked hard your entire life. Let our children take some of the burden. I know you are right, Samuel said, but it is hard to accept. I have always been the one doing the work, not watching it being done. Then learn to enjoy watching, Willow suggested. Enjoy seeing everything we built continuing without us having to do every piece of it ourselves. That is the gift of family, Samuel. The work continues. The legacy endures. Samuel recovered fully over the following months, regaining much of his strength, if not all of it. He learned to pace himself, to accept help, to find joy in his role as patriarch and advisor rather than primary worker. And through it all, Willow was by his side, just as she had been for nearly 50 years. In 1930, they celebrated their golden wedding anniversary, 50 years of marriage. The party was even larger than the one 5 years earlier, with people coming from as far as San Francisco and Sacramento to honor the couple whose love story had become legendary in the region. "Tell us the story," one of the younger grandchildren begged. "Tell us how Grandpa saved Grandma from the frozen lake." Samuel and Willow exchanged glances, smiling at the familiar request. They had told the story hundreds of times over the years, but it never got old. It was their story, the foundation of everything they had built. It was December 15th, 1879, Willow began, and I was running for my life across what I thought was a frozen meadow. I was young and foolish and did not realize until too late that I was running across a lake. The ice broke beneath me, and I fell into water so cold it felt like fire. I saw her go under, Samuel continued, and I did not think, I just acted. I ran toward the lake and jumped in after her, breaking through the ice to reach her. He wrapped his arms around me and pulled me to the surface, Willow said, and then he broke through the ice between us and the shore, using his body to clear a path. He saved my life that day. But she saved mine too, Samuel added. Maybe not in the same dramatic way, but just as surely. She gave me purpose, love, a family, a home. I was just a drifting ranch hand before I met her. She made me into the man I am. We saved each other, really, Willow concluded, as she always did. That is what love does. It saves us. It makes us better. It gives us a reason to be brave. The grandchildren sighed, and the adults smiled, and Samuel leaned over to kiss his wife just as he had done thousands of times before. The 1930s brought challenges. The Great Depression affected even their prosperous ranch, forcing difficult decisions and belt-tightening. But the family pulled together, supporting each other through the hard times. No one went hungry. No one lost their home. The Second Chance Ranch weathered the storm just as Samuel and Willow had weathered every storm before it. "We have been through worse," Samuel said during a particularly difficult winter. "We built this ranch from nothing. We can survive anything as long as we have each other." And they did survive. Not just survive, but thrive. By the late 1930s, the worst of the Depression was past, and the ranch was growing strong again. In 1940, Samuel and Willow celebrated 60 years since the day they met, and 59 years since their first conversation in Doc Morrison's front room. They were in their 80s now, their bodies frail, but their spirits undimmed. They moved slowly, with canes and careful steps, but they moved together, as they always had. 60 years, Willow said on the anniversary of their meeting. They were sitting on their front porch, wrapped in blankets against the December cold, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. 60 years since you jumped into that lake after me. Best decision I ever made, Samuel said, his voice thinner now but still full of warmth. I would do it again today if I could. You're too old to jump into frozen lakes, Willow said with a laugh. We both are. We will leave the heroics to the younger generation. But not the loving, Samuel said. I will never be too old for that. He reached over to take her hand, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching their legacy play out before them. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, all of them healthy and happy and loved, all of them proof that love, real love, endures. Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep on a warm night in June of 1941, 3 months shy of his 87th birthday. He simply did not wake up, his heart having finally given out after more than 8 decades of beating. Willow woke beside him, as she had every morning for nearly 60 years, and knew immediately that he was gone. She did not cry, not right away. Instead, she took his hand and held it, feeling its stillness, its cold. She remembered the first time he had held her hand, pulling her from the frozen lake. She remembered every time since then, thousands of moments of connection and comfort. "Thank you," she whispered to him, though he could no longer hear. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for this beautiful life. I will see you again, my love. When it is my time, I will find you again." The funeral was attended by what seemed like half the county. Samuel had been respected and loved by everyone who knew him. People told stories about his kindness, his integrity, his skill with horses, his devotion to his family. But most of all, they talked about his love for Willow, how everyone who knew them recognized that they were two halves of one whole. Willow bore the loss with quiet dignity. Though those who knew her well could see the light had dimmed in her eyes, she continued to live in their house, cared for by her children and surrounded by family. She remained sharp and engaged, still interested in the ranch operations, still dispensing advice and wisdom, but part of her was missing, the part that had been Samuel. "Do you miss him terribly?" Wendy asked one afternoon as she sat with her mother on the porch. "Every moment," Willow replied honestly. "It is like missing a piece of my own soul. We were together for 61 years. I do not know how to be without him." "But you are doing it," Wendy pointed out. "You are still here, still strong." "Because he would want me to be," Willow said. "Because our family needs me. Because there is still love to give and receive. But make no mistake, my darling. Part of me died with your father. I am simply waiting until it is time to join him." Willow lived for 3 more years after Samuel's death, years filled with love from her family but marked by an increasing fragility. She grew thinner, weaker, as if her body was preparing to let go. She spoke often of Samuel, of their life together, of how grateful she was for every moment they had shared. On December 15th, 1944, exactly 65 years after the day they met, Willow passed away quietly in her sleep. She was 92 years old, and her family believed she had simply chosen that day to leave, wanting to mark the anniversary of the moment her life truly began. They buried her beside Samuel, under a tree at the edge of their property, overlooking the land they had built together. The headstones were simple, bearing their names, their dates, and a single phrase: "Second chances." At the funeral, Simon, now in his 60s and gray-haired himself, spoke about his parents. "They showed us what love looks like," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Real, enduring, unconditional love. They met through tragedy and chose to build something beautiful from it. They faced every challenge together, never giving up, never letting go. They gave us a foundation of love so strong that everything we have built since rests upon it. That is their legacy. Not just this ranch, not just this family, but the example of how to love well. That is what they gave us." The ranch continued, passing through generations just as Samuel and Willow had dreamed it would. Their story became family legend, told and retold to every new generation. The tale of how a woman ran across a frozen lake, how a cowboy jumped in to save her, how that single act of courage led to 61 years of love and a legacy that would endure for generations. In the house they built together, in the rooms where they lived and loved and raised their children, echoes of Samuel and Willow remained. Their love had soaked into the very walls, becoming part of the structure itself. Families came and went, but the feeling remained: safety, warmth, home. And sometimes on cold December mornings when the frost covered the ground and the sun rose pink and gold over the Sierra Nevada mountains, people would swear they could see two figures walking hand in hand across the property, an old man and an old woman, still together, still in love, still marking the anniversary of the day their lives changed forever, because love like theirs does not end. It transforms, becoming something bigger than two people. It becomes legacy, it becomes family, it becomes the foundation upon which futures are built. Samuel and Willow's love story, which began with ice breaking and fear and a cowboy's courage, became eternal. A reminder that second chances exist, that love can bloom from tragedy, that two people committed to each other can build something that outlasts their own lives. Their story was complete, their love fulfilled, their legacy secured, and in the end, that was all that mattered. They had found each other, loved each other, and built a life worthy of that love. The rest was just the beautiful details of a life well lived and a love well cherished.